Thank you. Pretty much as was described, I'm Maddison. I work at VentraIP Australia. I am the Chief Business Development Officer. That title essentially means that I overlook the sales and marketing at VentraIP Australia. With that being said, I do take part in the leadership discussions. I'm a member of the leadership team at VentraIP Australia. I have been for a number of years, and I have a pretty, my side passion at VentraIP Australia is customer service. I really like the idea of always giving the best possible customer service and finding new ways to improve it. So by running this talk, it's really just to take you through what VentraIP Australia has learned over the last 5 years, and specifically, very briefly, over the last 3.5 years since making the decision, or 2.5 years since specifically making the change, to a 100% insourced local team based out of Melbourne in Victoria. So pretty much today I'm going to be talking about why we made the decision to bring it all in-house, what really influenced us to make that decision, which was to improve our customer service and quality of service that we provided, and why we focused on one major aspect of that and to improve, to go on above and beyond simply bringing it in-house, and that was our staff engagement. So I'll talk a little bit about staff engagement today, and what that means and the areas of staff engagement, and how that really affected our quality of service that we can provide. So unlike Galabaris's talk specifically about outsourcing inside Australia, when I say outsource, I mean that outside of Australia to specifically your Philippines or India. We have experience with both, and a little heads up, we found them to be subpar purely for communication issues and having problems with the quality of service provided. Not necessarily for the people themselves, they were lovely people and were awesome to work with. It was simply that the quality of service was not ideal. So our major focuses were on improving customer satisfaction, improving staff engagement, as I said, and reducing customer turnover. At the end of the day, it's all about reducing customer turnover, because if we can build a customer base, then we can continue to grow. So to give you a bit of an idea of why customer turnover is important, it was recently found, or recently estimated pretty accurately apparently, that in Australia the estimated cost of customer turnover is around $122 billion. So you can already see that the cost of customer turnover just due to negative experiences with an existing service provider is pretty damn high, and certainly I'm sure you can all appreciate, if you're in a similar industry to myself, where the services that you provide are integral and very, very involved in your customers' businesses and their life, how they make money essentially. I'm sure you understand that it only really takes a single negative customer experience to burn a bridge. And especially for VentraIP Australia, when we have to deal with the customer, it's not because they want to chat, it's because something's going wrong. So if something's going wrong, I personally believe that we need to be giving 150% of our capabilities, and we need to be showing that we are the providers that they want to stay with if anything ever goes wrong again. So as I said, customer service and quality of service is extremely important here. So to reiterate what I said about one negative experience, again, similar research paper also found that it was just one negative experience when it comes to an online service provider that would see somewhere around 55% of consumers on average, and I believe it gets closer to 60% when you look specifically at millennials, will go looking for another provider. I say consumers will leave because at the end of the day, if it is a significant problem and you've exacerbated the issue, I'm sure they will leave. Personal experience shows that they will, because if they go looking for another provider and you either are a little bit more expensive, or perhaps your services are starting to get a bit dated, you need to upgrade your services. If they find any other reason to move on to another provider, well, why wouldn't they? They've just experienced a negative experience with you. So why not take a risk with someone else, other than the cost of moving a service, I guess. So I guess the other part that takes this on is that when we started to look at how can we improve that single negative experience before I talk more so about the specifics of our outsourced team and how insourcing fixed this. Some of the things that we've found have worked across a number of our businesses. And certainly some, if you go researching, some ideas that are provided for SaaS providers specifically, or anybody that provides an online service, is that you can introduce automation. You can also introduce regular reviews with your customers and regular reviews with your staff. The other thing is that you can also improve staff engagement. Now, one thing that we have focused heavily on is staff engagement. However, what I want to highlight out of those 3 points is that they cost money, which means that you really want to make sure that when you're making changes that are going to cost you money already, so that is you're going to move from an Indian support team that costs about half of an Australian support team, you need to find ways to improve the profitability of that team, the efficiency and the efficacy of that team. Otherwise, you're going to be doubling up on your costs because you're going to double the cost of the team, and you're then going to take another step and you're going to have to introduce ways to further improve your consumers' quality of service, which is going to also cost you money. So one of the things that we really focused on is what is known as, sorry about that, is what is known as staff engagement. So I actually found this fact when I was building a case as to why we should be focusing on staff engagement. And this was that employees who are disengaged in the workplace are about 51% in America. So 51% of all employees in America fall into the disengaged. What that means is that a disengaged employee is somebody who comes in, does their 9 to 5 with a glazed over look, and they're literally just beating the clock. They don't have any real emotional connection to those who they work with. They don't enjoy the environment that they're in, and they really don't feel as though what they're doing is affecting your business. So to find a real connection there, you need to improve the environment, you need to improve the whole workforce. So some of the ways that, again, tie in with what I was just talking about, is that you can introduce regular staff reviews as opposed to customer reviews. You can focus on staff satisfaction as opposed to focusing on KPIs. You can focus on improving a rewarding environment and also the tools at our staff's disposal. So these are things that we have taken a hold of, I guess, and some things that I'll briefly speak about as we move forward. But I guess the question that I get approached with a lot when I talk about disengagement in the workplace and anecdotally say, hey, you really should make your workplace fun. A lot of people say, well, why should we do that? You're saying to me that, okay, 51% of US employees feel disengaged. Why do I care as long as they're doing their 9 to 5? Well, recent studies have shown that highly engaged businesses, which are defined as a business that is made up of highly engaged employees, find that they are about 17% more productive on average. So in this instance, you can already see that by introducing a highly engaged workforce as opposed to an outsourced team that may be costing you a little bit less, you're already starting to see just by introducing a local team that work together, that are building bonds, that are building an environment that they enjoy and that they feel they're a part of, they're already going to inherently start to build a more effective workforce, and their day-to-day is going to be more effective. So you can understand that obviously by being more involved in their work, they're going to actually go above and beyond. They're not going to need to have a manager that's going to be standing behind them, and a manager that's going to need to be, tapping their watch, hey, get off the phone, or tapping their, get on the next ticket, or get into that customer's WordPress. By knowing that they're having regular reviews, they're getting noticed for their quality of work, they're more likely to be more productive, just on an average. So another fun fact is that, especially in Australia, this is significant. Businesses that are highly engaged find that they see about 41% reduced absenteeism. That doesn't mean that they see 41%, like they're not getting 41% less sick days. They're just finding that they're getting a significant reduced absenteeism about 40% of the time. So absenteeism is essentially just unnecessary sick leave or unnecessary absence from the workplace. This has a bit of a rolling effect in that if an employee is absent and you've already got quite a tight strung team, the team is doing the absolute most that they already can, they're now going to become more stressed. They're going to become disengaged. They're going to find that now they've got to do, if you've got a team of say 5, one of them leaves, they've now got to do that extra work just because that employee is not there. Now, this is another fact as to why, by having that reduced absenteeism, you can run your team a little bit leaner, you can rely on them, and they'll be there for one another. You're not going to have someone that goes out on Sunday night, goes to an after party maybe, or something like that. You're not going to have them just take the next day off. They're more likely to come in and feel engaged, and they're going to have that relationship with their with their co-workers, so they're less likely to just up and take the day off and screw them, I don't care what they feel. So the final little fact there that is more of a less causal and more coincidental relationship is that in the same research paper, they found that the businesses that were highly engaged, that they defined as highly engaged through their tests, actually were about 21% more likely to have a greater profitability. So whilst I can't tell you why that would be, other than the other 2 facts that I've described, things like having employees that are far more engaged and are far more likely to go above and beyond, far more likely to do more, and far less likely to take unnecessary time off. There's no real reasoning for this. But as a business owner, I'm sure you can appreciate that if you can make more money or be more profitable, then maybe making the move to an all-Australian team or an all-in-house team is a little more reasonable when you know that you're going to be more likely to be profitable. So I'll talk about VentraIP Australia's specific situation and what we did and why we really got to where we were. So VentraIP Australia is one of Australia's largest domain name and web hosting providers. We're a cPanel web host. We service over 150,000 customers nowadays. We have a team of just over 40 in-house now with no outsourced staff. So as I mentioned, we have relied heavily on a very strong foundation that's built around automation and ensuring that our customers have a high quality of service at all times. So our infrastructure is very high quality. We ensure that our control panels are optimal for our customers, and we listen to what our customers want and need. And we've done this since day one. When VentraIP Australia was founded 10 years ago, the idea was to provide a high quality service in Australia at an affordable price. And the idea was to show that you didn't have to go out of Australia to get that. So just like many companies in the ICT industry, VentraIP Australia went through a very rapid period of growth, about 5 years in, that saw the technical requirements of, and certainly customer service requirements of VentraIP Australia exponentially grow. So this forced us to make the decision, do we want to hire a number of Australians or do we want to hire outsourced? Everybody else did outsourced, so we went the same route. It was cheap, it was easy, or so we thought, so we outsourced. I believe many providers still do the same thing, and we introduced a tiered support strategy, which was essentially if a customer contacted us, they were put through to our Indian support team as the means of first contact. They were then escalated up on request, or if the Indian support team could not handle the response. The problem with this was the customer satisfaction very rapidly dropped over about an 18-month period or thereabouts, and we found that customer turnover was starting to grow, customer satisfaction was at an all-time low, and we were getting a large number of customer complaints. So we had an escalation policy beyond that whereby a customer could then contact our management team. We're finding hundreds of them coming through a month, and we just simply decided as a team something needed to change. So when we did a market review, we found that, as I mentioned earlier, our quality of service, as in our infrastructure, the software surrounding it, our anti-malware, our mail servers, everything was was at an industry standard or above. Our pricing was on the lowest end of the industry, which meant there could be no reason other than quality of service that the customers would be leaving. Because we've found that even no matter how hard you try, some customers simply, when they're a little bit angry, they don't want to tell you why they're leaving, so we didn't want to bug them too much. So we came up with two real problems that were identified. And the first problem was that we were having issues, as I mentioned, with our outsourced support. We did a very thorough review, found almost zero first contact resolution via emails or e-tickets. And we found that our outsourced training had reached a point where it was actually easier to replace the staff member than it was to train them and to put time in to try and retrain them. Instead, we would replace them and they would continue on their way by following scripts and the such. Purely because we had spent years trying to individually train outsourced staff members and provide them with the resources necessary. But we found that the cultural differences or the lack of understanding of what a customer really wanted was just too heavily ingrained, and that we simply could not train that out of them, I guess. And so we also located or identified a connected issue, which was our local employee engagement levels were at an all-time low. We had spent so much time attempting to train and make better the processes surrounding an outsourced team that our in-source team, our local team, were kind of getting stuck with the crap end of the stick. So they were only dealing with escalations. They were only dealing with customers who were calling with a direct complaint, and they were only dealing with issues that were very tedious, very difficult to fix. And almost every single time a staff member had to deal with a customer, they were already 10, 15 tickets in, maybe a full day of circling on the help desk, and they were pretty much ready to explode. So our staff were having to deal with that end of it. So they weren't really, really happy. So we thought, okay, the first goal was to bring everything back in-house. So as I've mentioned, the problem with bringing everything in-house was that it was going to cost a bit of money, and that we had to find ways to hopefully improve this. This meant that for a short period of time, our in-source staff would have to take on a lot more workload than they were used to. Fortunately, spoiler, it got a lot easier than it did harder, which was fantastic. But to give you insight into that, over half our staff at the time, which was about 15 staff in-house back in late 2015, were technical support staff. So we really needed to fix this quickly. We also wanted to improve the management of staff. So as I mentioned very early on, we wanted to introduce staff satisfaction-based reviews that were happening on a regular basis. We wanted to introduce a rewarding environment. We wanted to ensure that we were hiring for the team and not just for the role. So I'll briefly mention that again later. So to mitigate the cost, being completely upfront here, because I believe that anyone that does go through a similar process to this will need to do something very similar, and similar to some of the if you were in Adam's talk earlier today, I believe, Mick Adams, what was his first name? I'm terrible with memory, sorry guys. He was talking about some of the ways that you can improve, you can make money easily. 5 ways you can easily make money next week. One of the ones that he said was most difficult was reevaluating the price of your services, and that was exactly one of the first things that we did. So we began the planning to bring everything in-house, and we actually, one of the things was to increase our prices by about 25%. We also invested in additional development team members to begin automating mundane tasks that our outsourced team were doing, network maintenance, things like this, purely because we wanted to improve our local staff's satisfaction and engagement. We also underwent a retraining of the entire team, which involved more just touching up on taking a step back and doing a review of how we interacted with customers and the mantra that we had with how we felt we should deal with problems. And then we introduced policies to really improve their efficiency and to tighten the expectations. So the second goal was to improve their engagement levels. And as I mentioned, we needed to reduce their workloads. We used the strategies that I just mentioned. We also introduced those frequent one-on-ones as well as middle management. So we found staff who were going above and beyond. We introduced them into roles where they were essentially leading their own teams. We found this not only empowered them and improved their engagement levels, it allowed them to provide direct feedback to their staff, remembering that this is on about a scale of 8 people at the time, so we had about 2 teams. And as we continue to scale, we scale that out. We also improved our phone support policies because, as I mentioned earlier, phone support was a little bit of a problem because it was just customers screaming in our ears for 30 minutes at a time. Unfortunately, it was tied in with the improving of our customer service that we were able to fix that. So the results were pretty amazing. And I know that I've spoken a little bit about some of the techniques that we used and a little bit about some of the things we had to do. And I've probably breezed over it so much that it sounds like we didn't really do much. But when we finally did introduce we pulled away the outsourced support team, we announced the price rises, we announced the changes, our staff were now following a new roster. Our customer escalations, which these are the management escalations, not just escalations, these are the complaints, went from, at its peak, 800, I should say. This is at the time we acquired a company that didn't exactly have the greatest infrastructure, and their websites got pulled apart by our malware system when they got introduced, but I digress. It did continue to decline and eventually went down to 200 per month. I should note that these escalations at this time were purely the result of the inability of our staff to be able to fix policy-driven things such as interacting with registry bodies or fixing any other issues that simply are outside the scope of support. In 2018, it's probably closer to about 50. So we have doubled our customer base since this time, and we have far fewer customer escalations, which is fantastic. So you can definitely see that even from a management point of view, where the cost of our managers, the higher tier employees, the higher cost employees having to deal with these problems, you can already see that savings right then and there, just to give you a little bit more on that profitability scale. Another thing that I have been doing for years is customer surveys every year, an annual survey that gets at least 6,000 responses. I find them to be extremely enlightening. Customers sometimes come out with some pretty crazy things. In 2015, one of the first surveys that I performed, we had an NPS score of 13, which at the time I remember doing an air pump. I was like, yes, we're awesome. 13 is amazing because anything above 0 is considered good. In 2018, at the beginning of the year, we actually had a 67, which is far above the industry average, and essentially means that about 90% of our customers are essentially 100% happy with our quality of service. So even from a quality of service point of view, you can see that they're extremely happy. Some things that I also learned from this is that 85%, when we performed our 2018 survey, 85% of our customers that responded to this survey came from another provider. So that means that 85% of our customers have heard about us through one way or another and have come to us and are still with us, with the average, I think, life length being the customer life cycle being something like 2.5, 3 years. So it's pretty high as well. They've actually said that the quality of support, the fact that we're 100% Australian, and the reputation of our products are the reasons for them moving from another provider to VentraIP Australia. So this is actually, this is pretty significant because we don't spend much money on marketing. So we're not trying to tell people that we are a high quality provider. We don't offer an affiliate service. This has built a customer base of 85% of our customers that have heard about us through a friend or family, that have found a forum, found a recommendation, have come to us and are still with us because of the quality of service that we provide. So what do I recommend from my time going through this? And I did mention them at the very beginning. Some of the things that we have introduced very specifically within our workplace is that we have introduced a rewarding environment that really rewards outstanding performance. So this doesn't mean that we introduce KPIs. This means that we find communicated acknowledgements from customers, from managers, from co-workers are then rewarded. And that means that we actually introduce company-wide emails. So anytime anybody does anything that is going above and beyond, the entire company hears about it, which at 40 people, there's a lot of emails nowadays. We introduce team meetings, which means that on a team-based, our entire company works on an agile framework. So every single team has a stand-up every day where people are acknowledged, their quality of service acknowledged. We then have weekly meetings for the whole company every Friday at 4 p.m. We do a team meeting. We open up the bar. We have some drinks for those who want to have a few drinks on a Friday afternoon. We do announcements. We celebrate birthdays, and I've got 5 minutes, so I won't explain it, but we do have a Wheel of Fortune style wheel that we introduced that has a lot of prizes on it. That is a little bit, not everyone gets one every week, but it's an awesome way to just improve morale and for people to look forward to the end of the week to really round out that week and be acknowledged for their going above and beyond. The next is that I highly recommend introducing an environment that builds solid relationships. So I've mentioned this a few times. And what I mean by that is essentially find ways to focus on teamwork, find ways to introduce peer reviews and to have co-workers working with one another as opposed to a direct tiered management style where you feel as though you're always waiting for your manager to tell you, did you meet your KPIs? Alternatively, you could look at the stats. The one that I didn't quote, I think it was that staff who have relationships in the office, that's not as in friendships, or people that feel that their co-workers are their friends, are far less likely to leave the company, about 45% less likely to turn over. So that means that they're going to hang around. They've got a higher satisfaction and higher engagement, as I've hopefully explained a little bit in this talk. And overall, they're more satisfied in their daily work because they're working with their friends. So they feel like they're coming in to have a good time. Finally, I always recommend hiring for the team and not the role. I am heavily involved in our hiring and onboarding process. I'm always involved in no matter what department we're hiring for. I sit in on the first round interview. We try and have a really relaxed first round interview and make the person feel welcome, and we get to know the person. I think I learn more about what they like to do in their spare time than I do asking them specifically about the role itself. I let the devs, or if we're hiring for marketing, I let the marketers, we make sure that the first round interview is a really get to know you session. And that really does play on all the factors that I've spoken about, because we've found that as we've grown to a team of 40, every single team is super engaged. They're so happy to be in the workplace. They have a desire to learn, they have a positive attitude, and they really, I think if you ask any employee in our company, they would say that they never go home feeling like, oh my God, I've got to come back in here again tomorrow, no matter how busy it gets, because we really have tried to build an engaged workforce. So one last rebuttal that a lot of people that I speak to like to bring up is chatbots and IVRs. And look, chatbots and IVRs are fantastic, but when they go out and ask people in the street, would you like to speak to an IVR to fix your issue? 39%, or would you rather clean a public toilet, a dirty public toilet? 39% of respondents said that they'd rather clean a toilet. So if you really are, looking at ways to save money, I highly implore you, if you are looking for the long term and you want to really create a loyal customer base through an engaged workforce, I do recommend looking at building a workforce to be bragged about in-house. So thanks guys, appreciate it. Sorry for going over.